Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Tuesday, February 11th, and we are 2 days away from pitchers and catchers reporting for the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, how are you feeling? You got the baseball itch?
The bug is creeping up and feeling it in my bones, feeling it in my guts. I was talking some ball with a buddy yesterday over some beers, and I'm really starting to feel like it's getting close. You know, the Super Bowl was exciting for all the reasons of the Chiefs not winning, and now I am very much ready for the Toronto Blue Jays to do some not winning or hopefully some winning.
It's always the best as soon as the Super Bowl ends, your timeline gets flooded with the instant reaction, the MVP, the Eagles win graphics, and the baseball, the floor is yours tweets. And it really gets you going, gets the juices pumping. And it's going to be an interesting spring training for the Blue Jays. Obviously, we have Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s self-imposed extension deadline, which comes up at the first full squad workout for the Blue Jays, which I believe is February 18th. So I guess we're exactly a week away from that now. And obviously, that's going to be the headline that dominates things, I think, in the next few days here. But you know, there's no lack of storylines with this team. Obviously, coming in with a really new look roster, basically with some veterans coming in and some young guys trying to compete for spots. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting, and just definitely fired up to get this season going.
Absolutely. Hope springs eternal in the Blue Jays. A lot of reasons for hope this year because that's what they will be selling, I think, on the large part. But you know, they add a couple of outfielders, they add a couple of infielders, they add a couple of pitchers, and now you hope it translates into some more success this coming season.
Yeah, let's start with the Vlad thing. I feel like that is obviously the kind of news of the month, of the week, of whatever, obviously as that deadline gets ever closer, we are all on Vlad watch. And I'm wondering, a week out from this deadline, things have been pretty quiet on the Vlad extension front. I think, we haven't gotten the Hector Gomez tweet suggesting that the extension is coming. We haven't gotten a Carlos Baerga
Bayerga, same difference.
graphic saying that anything's coming. So, um, how confident are you that they're going to be able to get this done? And what do you think that a deal would look like if it does come together here before the
So
18th?
based on everything that reporters have kind of leaked or indicated, it sounds like we're talking 400 plus million and probably into the 450 range. I believe it was John Heyman that provided that insight maybe a week, two ago. And at this point, you know, you're really staring down kind of the barrel of a kind of a you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But you got to get them signed. You've tried to spend all this money on other all stars and superstars, and next year, of course, Vlad is going to be that guy hitting the free agent market. You're better off just going out and giving this guy what he wants, or at least something close to it, and trying to get that deal done. Now, as far as if that will happen, I think that's another question altogether and a bigger one even at that, because it seems like this front office is big on the internal valuations. And I wonder if this front office just sees Vlad as just a first baseman as opposed to, you know, Soto being a generational on base guy. And of course, Otani being a guy that is going to change the face of your franchise, both on an international scale and on a, you know, day to day talent scale. I would I would expect them to get a deal done because it feels like it would be silly for both parties if they didn't. Not that Vlad's going to lose any money or anything, but there's no reason to even put this season in jeopardy because of the ups and downs he's had over the years. There's a chance he costs himself money just as much as there's a chance he makes himself money because he is so very variable year to year. But for the Blue Jays, you need a star. And if Bo is walking, and it sure seems like he is headed out the door, you need someone to be the star. And it seems like Vlad is your guy. So you need to get that deal done.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked like ad nauseum why they need to get the deal done and why it makes sense for the team. I obviously I think Vlad we've kind of seen his floor, and if he has a 2023 this year, then what does his contract look like? He probably does lose like 100 million, maybe more, if he has like a 2023 repeat in 2025. But I think you look at just the way that he hits the ball, the transformation that he underwent last year. I think it's very unlikely that he does have one of those seasons. So yeah, so I think you look at it, it's obviously there's motivation on both sides to get it done, and I kind of lean on the side of it getting done. I would understand if you're Vlad though, saying, you know what, I'm just gonna walk this to free agency if you guys aren't gonna meet the number that I want. And I'm really intrigued to like see kind of how it does play out, because we've seen baseball free agency, and obviously Vlad's not a free agent at this point, but we've seen baseball free agency kind of take on two animals, right? Where you get the upper end of bidding with like the Juan Sotos and Shohei Ohtani, where things kind of get out of hand, to be honest, and then you get like the market of like an Alex Bregman or Pete Alonso or Cody Bellinger, or these guys who kind of have their free agencies leak on into February, where teams aren't willing to go bid for them, right? Because they have those valuations set for those guys, and they're not willing to go above it despite what the players think that they're worth. And Vlad is kind of in this tier of in between those two groups, right? Like he's not Juan Soto, he's not Shohei Ohtani, but he's also not Alex Bregman, and he's not Cody Bellinger, he's not Pete Alonso, because he's 2025. And you look at it and it's kind of like, well, what does that tier in between those groups of free agents kind of end up making? And obviously the numbers bear that out, where it's probably going to be like a $450 million deal, kind of sitting somewhere at the midpoint between what an Anthony Santander is getting and what Juan Soto is getting. So it's going to be interesting to see. I really do think that it is on the Blue Jays to match Vlad's ask at this point. I think you probably could see a little bit of give from him. Um, what do you think would be the number where Vlad would be the one kind of taking, like the number where Vlad would go, okay, that's good enough? Because I think the Jays could come out and be like 450, and Vlad's like, heck yeah, that's exactly what I want. But
Yeah.
like, where
There's
below that do you kind of see him maybe relenting a little bit on having like a firm ask?
I have a tough time seeing it below about the 415 range. I think it'd be really nice if it was in the 380 range. I mean, before Juan Soto signs, I think, like 10 330 or 11 335 or 340, whatever was probably the range. I don't know if Vlad earns himself $120 million by watching another guy put pen to paper. I get why, but it just doesn't seem like it makes any sense for that to be the case. So, on that, I would hope that there is some willingness to go below the four, but it seems like that's an extremely unlikely outcome. At that, I do think that for this deal to get done, it's gonna have to come in around the four, because I don't see the Blue Jays go into that 4.5 range.
Yeah, I think the midpoint. I think that anything below four is probably not even worth Vlad's time to talk about. I think that's probably the way that he looks at it. And for the Blue Jays, going to 450, I think you probably look at him and you say, well, prove it to us and we'll give you 450 in October, kind of thing. If he goes out and has, another five win season and excuse me, another 160 WRC plus, then you can maybe feel a little more confident in giving him that 450 million mark, instead of kind of sitting there and giving it to him for the 1 year, coming off a year where he's worth one WAR and had a 118 WRC plus.
Yeah, so you have to make a decision here on him. I just, again, it's a tough spot, right? And it's been spoken about ad nauseum, but it's really starting to reach the point, reaching a pressure point where you've got to make a decision on Vlad, and Vlad's got to make a decision on the Blue Jays. And I don't know if there's any indications that a deal's going to get done, but I think really for both parties, and especially the Blue Jays, they need to get something done.
Yeah, there's there's going to be a lot of pressure on this front office because of course the offseason going the way it did. I think ultimately they land in a good spot, but there is going to be the pressure to get this done and kind of solidify your window for the next few years instead of entering the wilderness in 2026 without Vlad and Bo. And the roster in 2026 could be
Could be a little
it
shallow.
could be rough if Vlad and Bo walk. I think you're looking at that 2026 roster and you're a little concerned. I'm not sure the heart of the order of George Springer and Anthony Santander is
it's
inspiring a ton of confidence
it's
without
not
the
ideal.
the young superstars. So let's move on though. We've obviously done lots of Vlad talk this offseason and last year. Hopefully we do get the opportunity to talk about
Continue
some
talking about
other,
Vlad.
well, yes, that and also, the opportunity to talk about some other players this year. As far as like intriguing storylines go for this Blue Jays team, you know, we talked about it before we hit record, but there isn't like necessarily a ton of position battles this year, right? Like I think you're pretty set at most positions. I think you kind of look at what's going on in left field. Maybe, it depends on, I guess, is Santander playing defense? Is he just a DH? And then third base, Ernie Clement kind of seems like the guy that's set to handle the bulk of the load there. And everywhere else, like you got your 5-man rotation seemingly set. Yariel, I guess, is going to be stretched out. And then you got like maybe one bullpen spot that's up for grabs at this point.
Yeah, maybe two. I mean, we'll see what happens with guys like Zach Pop. He's obviously out of options. You see if he's in the picture for that last bullpen spot. There's a couple of other guys I think of. Ryan Burr might get a kick at the can. There's a handful of guys that are obviously in that mix for the bullpen, but beyond that, I don't know if I'd even say left field is a position battle because I think Santander is going to get basically the runway to go out and take that spot, right? Barring something I think a little bit unforeseen, and obviously the defense is not ideal there, but you would figure that they're going to sacrifice any left field defense just to have that made up by a guy like a Dalton Varsho, even if he's going to start the year on the injured list. I'm thinking, I don't know if there's a position battle really anywhere except for backup catcher. It's kind of set. They have maybe a bit of a opening for a guy to slide in there as a designated hitter, but you're not really going to get a bona fide option there because you want the flexibility to put Vlad there, to put Springer there, to put Anthony Santander there. It seems like this team kind of has its identity coming into the first week of spring training in a way that they didn't meaningfully last year.
Yeah, the Santander thing, maybe, maybe working with Kevin Kiermaier will unlock something with him. We can, I guess we didn't talk about that, but Kevin Kiermaier returns to the team as a special assistant. We've talked about him as a potential coaching option before. A guy who, obviously seems to love the Blue Jays organization, probably gets to live close to home and do the special assistant stuff because I believe they said he's going to be, working with all levels. So really cool for some of the outfielders to get to learn from him. I'm not sure how much he's teaching like a Dalton Varsho at this point, but I think you look at kind of the lower level guys, the Joey Loperfitos, the Jonathan Clases, the younger outfielders. I think that's probably the group that's going to be a little bit more impacted by him.
Well, it's interesting because they bring him on as they have this glut of options in that spot. I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily put Davis Schneider in that group, but he's another guy that plays in the outfield that right now is potentially battling for a fourth outfield option. They have a lot of guys there that might end up factoring into the Blue Jays equation at some point this year that are pre-arbitration, that are something of a fringe option. It's interesting the timing of that, but I do want to talk as well about kind of the just the whole makeup because it's I don't know if you agree that this is kind of a team that you can kind of pencil in a guy at every spot and you kind of know who your guy is there.
Yeah, I think so. I think you kind of look at the starting nine and you can kind of predict what that's going to look like. I think basically barring, unless they sign Alex Bregman or splurge on a DH like a JD Martinez or somebody like that, I think you're looking at it and you know I we have it on the rundown for today to do an opening day roster projection. And I think you can pretty easily do it, right? Like, I mean, I think right field you got Springer, center field at this point it is going to be a roster battle just because Varsho is going to start the year on the IL. But you look at that, I think basically as can Joey Loperfido or Jonathan Clase have a good enough spring training to force Nathan Lucas from that spot, or can Miles Straw, earn his way onto the 40 man? And then in left field, you've got Santander. He could be a DH if Loperfido or David Schneider or somebody kind of forces your hand in that spot. At first, you got Vlad, you got Kirk catching. At second, you got Jimenez. At short, you got Bo. At third, you got Ernie. And unless Relvis Martinez comes out and hits like 8 home runs in spring training, or Addison Barger does the same thing, I think that's Ernie's spot to lose. So, you kind of look at the lineup that way, and then the bench from there, I think is an intriguing conversation. The bench, I guess, is kind of where the bulk of the battles are going to take place this spring because, if you want to build a bench, your catcher, you got to have a backup catcher. So that's either going to be Tyler Heineman or Christian Bethancourt. I would say at this point, one of those two. Obviously, Heineman has the 40-man spot right now, and Bethancourt is an NRI. And then you need your backup shortstop. So, you look at that, that's probably Leo Jimenez's spot, I would imagine.
Yeah. You
Um,
want probably a lefty bopper there. You're probably looking at Addison Barger taking that spot, I would figure. And then maybe
yeah,
you're looking at David Schneider because of the experience, but I wouldn't even say his spot's guaranteed. You got
yeah.
Clase in the mix too. You got Loperfido in the mix too. This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
I wanted to get your thought. I had this thought the other day, but Leo Jimenez start opening day third baseman.
You know, I understand where you're coming from. I think that the offensive profile on him is a little bit higher than Ernie Clement just based on his production at the AAA level. And defensively, he would probably be maybe a minor fall off from Clement, but maybe only slightly, which is saying something because Clement, of course, was Gold Glove level. I think that it's an unlikely scenario, but I actually think that if we're talking who the Blue Jays backup third baseman is, should Clement either have a just horrendous spring training or a horrendous first 2 weeks or get hurt, I think Leo Jimenez is a guy you're pretty comfortable with taking that spot and providing comparable production. And because of the age, potentially more.
Yeah, I think, kind of had that thought the other day. It's interesting. Again, I think it's Clement's spot to lose, but Jimenez, if you're kind of looking at a guy to maybe give you a little bit more ceiling at the position offensively, I think he could be that guy. But then, again, they have Relvis and Barger and all these guys that also could kind of play into the mix there. And obviously, Ernie was so good defensively last year at third and short. I think if you put him at third base the entire year, he probably does win the Gold Glove. Just kind of him, bouncing around a little bit cost him some of the numbers, some of the innings, kind of stuff like that. And he was good enough offensively for a guy who was that good defensively, right? So yeah, I just think it'll be interesting to see if there is room for somebody else to grab that spot from Clement. And I think Jimenez would probably be one of the leading candidates to do it. And I think Ernie would be a really good candidate to kind of be that utility guy again and give you that backup shortstop if Bo needs to DH or anything like that. But of course, you know what? I mean, he could slide over for a day or so as well. So it will be a battle to watch, I guess.
Yeah, I think that whole kind of side of the infield, right? Because of Jimenez, because of Clement, because of the even the other Jimenez, Andres Jimenez might even factor into that equation
Yeah.
as well. Maybe not third base, but certainly potentially shortstop. I think that there's some machinations, right? I think maybe the word to watch, machinations for this Blue Jays team, because right now, you basically have your 26, 27, 28 gears basically in place. And now the question is going to be who goes where, who gets moved, who shuffles down, who shuffles around, who shuffles over positions. That I think is going to be the key for this Blue Jays team. And then, of course, you get on to June, July, and so forth. And that's when, you start to be like, okay, we need this, we need that. This is not working. This isn't working. And you go accordingly, right?
Yeah, and you know what I think as we kind of build out a roster, and I should have mentioned Will Wagner as being a guy in that mix as well, right? Because I think if you're building your opening day lineup right now, I think he's your DH. Is that fair to say that he would probably be
I think so. And I don't, not that he's, some incredible hitter, not that he's necessarily DH worthy as a bat, but of the group we kind of mentioned, he's probably the guy that you're most comfortable expecting a certain level of production out of.
yeah,
And,
for
and of
sure.
course, the eye, you hope that he gets on base. And if the on base goes up, that only makes him a more valuable hitter. Like there's reason to believe that he's a guy that's going to be successful at the big league level.
Who of that like prospect group? I mean, you kind of look at the guys who are on the 40-man roster, right? Davis Schneider, Addison Barger, Leo Jimenez, Orelvis, Wagner, Loperfido, Clase, and you can put Nathan Lucas in that group if you want. But out of that group, like who are you most confident in coming in and having a good spring training and breaking camp like on the major league roster? Because as well, like those are guys that you want to get every day at bats, right? So like to me, I don't know if you want to take an Addison Barger and put him on your bench because he's a guy who you probably, I mean, not that he has anything to prove at AAA, but he's probably a guy that you want playing every day and staying improving, right? Kind of staying on that
Well,
track.
here's what I would say to that is I don't think we should discount the potential for a Addison Barger George Springer platoon. I think that George Springer is at the stage in his career where he's a modest producer. It's not like he's an excellent defender out in right field. And it's a bit of a sunk cost fallacy to be like his spot is penciled in. So it might not happen immediately. It might take some time for things to develop this way. I don't think that the Jays are going to want to go into spring training telling George Springer, you're a bench bat now. But I do think a Barger Springer platoon is a definite possibility.
Yeah, I could see like if things go poorly for Springer to start the year, that you kind of do start to cut that cord a little bit and
Like, does
reduce the playing
he?
time.
Did, is there a universe he gets Jose Abreu? Because I think there is.
I would say there's a universe, but it would have to be really bad. Like the
It would
results on
have
the
to be.
field would have to
Yeah.
be Jose Abreu level. Like if you look at what he did last year, he had a zero WRC plus.
Yeah. Now, I mean, there's also a decent chance. I mean, we know George Springer. He might just end up on the 15-day IL midway through April, and
A
Barger just
little
takes
wink
the
wink
spot.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I think Springer like kind of has, the veteran presence. Not to say that somebody like Abreu doesn't, but it seems like Springer is a leader in that clubhouse, and it would just be, I feel like if they were to kind of start to cut bait or start to like really pull him back, I think that things would have to be going like pretty poorly. Because
Yeah.
last year they went bad for him and he was still, 95 WRC plus. Like that's not what you want from a guy that you're paying $25 million a year. But, for a 35-year-old, he had a 322 xWOBA, which was it's still not great, but it shows that maybe the quality of contact is in there a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
he did have like that one stretch, and this is maybe just talking yourself into believing things, but if he comes out and you look at like a Steamer projection, right, and like Steamer has him at a 110 WRC plus and 23 homers and 15 stolen bases. Like if that's the result, I think you're jumping for joy because that would be wonderful for him to kind of come out and do that and have that bounce back. But you know, to me, if you had to guess on February 11th what George Springer's 2025 WRC plus is going to be, what would your prediction be?
It wouldn't be over 100. I'd tell you that much. I don't think that there's reason to believe that he's going to bounce back in a meaningful way at 35 years old. I guess that there's some positive regression you want to bake into it, but I think that the aging curve might have something to say about that. Not to mention that because of his fragility, I can't imagine he's going to age particularly gracefully.
Yeah, he'll be like, probably not in like the top five guys that you're watching in spring training because, obviously the young guys are probably a little bit more important. But the way that he does come out in spring training, I think is going to be worth watching for sure. Because if he comes out and has like a decent spring, or if he comes out and just looks completely washed as well, I think that would be very concerning for them.
Yeah, I would expect that there's going to be a little bit of extra scrutiny around George Springer and his production over the first, call it 8 to 10 weeks
Yeah.
of his time in camp with the Blue Jays and into the season.
Okay, let's finish out building this opening day position player side of things. We got Springer, Vlad, Santander, Bichette, Kirk, Jimenez, Clement, Avarsho's on the IL. So who do you think is going to be that center fielder on opening day?
I wouldn't discount Miles Straw. I just wouldn't. I know that he's on the 40 or he's not on the 40 man. So I recognize that there is a certain element of him having to win the spot over a guy like a Nathan Lucas. But I think that the way that this front office values defense and the way that he is able to patrol center field, I think over a 6 week span that you might be missing Varsha or even less, really. I think that they're going to want to replace that production with someone they feel confident patrolling center field in a way that Nathan Lucas isn't quite a legit center field option.
I don't disagree, but to like this is again maybe wishful thinking, but I think Nathan Lucas um should enter spring as like the favorite to win that spot. I think it was 20 games or whatever, but he had the 132 WRC plus when he came back. And obviously, you know what, I think even better for the Blue Jays would be like if Joey Loperfido came into spring and was really good and kind of claimed that spot. But I just think Miles Straw, like it, it's it's just not really the guy that I feel like you want to put into your opening day lineup. Um, and again, that's more, I think, from like a fan's perspective of wanting to watch this team, right? Like I don't think Miles Straw improves the watchability of this team. He doesn't give you confidence in the ceiling of this team. And
Do you think Miles Straw will play major league games for the Blue Jays this year? Or maybe that's not a fair question because I'm sure he'll crack one or two minimum. Do you think he can crack like 20, 25?
like I just think that he's behind the eight ball being not on the 40 man, right? Like they need to DFA somebody to get him onto the roster. And, maybe there's a trade coming, right? Like maybe they do trade some of these young guys for a DH type, and that does open the door for Straw to kind of sneak his way onto the 40 man. But I think the way things are constructed right now, like I mean, Miles Straw or Stuart Burrow on your 40 man, like I don't think anybody's claiming Stuart Burrow, and you can look at that handful of relievers as well. But I think when it comes down to it, like I mean, he's does to me have to prove himself offensively in spring training to even be worth kind of adding to the 40 man because just the youth of like a Joey Loperfido and a Jonathan Clase and those guys, even Nathan Lucas to some extent, right? Because he is so like young as a major leaguer, like he doesn't have the experience at the big league level. I just think that you can kind of dream on what they can give you more than Straw.
Yeah, which is a fair thing to say, right? Like I don't necessarily disagree with that assessment. I just think that there is a bit of a discounting of him as an option where it
Yeah.
feels like he's a guy that fits the profile that this front office tends to value. So it seems like a guy that the Blue Jays could be looking at as an option and as a legitimate part of their plans going forward. We've even heard so much basically from Ross Atkins, even if it was almost certainly a attempt to save face.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. So let's say so our starting nine. Well, who do we want to pencil in there
Let's
for?
pencil in Nathan Lucas just to be
Okay,
safe.
okay. Lucas is there. So our bench, Tyler Heineman or Christian Bethancourt behind the plate as your backup catcher. I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion on who's going to win that spot. I think Heineman again has the advantage being on the 40 man. He doesn't have any options, and he seems to have like some rapport with the organization based on how many times they've acquired him. So again, I think he's the front runner there. I think you put Jimenez as your backup shortstop, and then you got the two extra bench spots where you probably need a lefty bat and
Which is where I
like
think Barger
a
factors in.
defensive
Although
center fielder as the other guy, like a
and
defensive replacement or pinch runner.
maybe you're going low Perfito there, and then of course Wagner's the DH, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think again though,
Well,
like
what? Yeah,
Loperfido, like would you rather him be getting every day at bats in AAA
that's the
than
question,
him,
right?
sitting on the bench and being like a defensive replacement type?
I don't know. I think that these are guys that you need to have show it at the big league level, right? That's why I'm kind of like, Loperfido's 26, I believe, and I'm pretty sure Barger is 25. So not that their clocks are ticking per se. Guys break out at 27, 28 all the time. But these guys are rapidly exiting the prospect discussion if they haven't already exited that discussion. These are guys that need to be able to perform at the big league level. And if they're unable to do so, then there's clearly a future for them, maybe in another org, maybe as AAA options. But if they want to be big leaguers, this is kind of the period of time that they have to make good on that promise.
Yeah, and you know what? It's a good problem to have for the Blue Jays because I think you look at last year and the debate was like, who's going to be that last guy? Is going to be Eduardo Escobar, Ernie Clemente, or Santiago Espinal? Like these are much better problems to have where you kind of have like youth depth being the question mark of like who's going to make the roster. And I do wonder if you kind of look at it like they don't really have outside of like Loperfido or Barger a left-handed hitter who you can pencil into that like lefty bench bat role. But I wonder if like if you look at it, would it make more sense for your opening day lineup to be Loperfido in center, Nathan Lucas on the bench, and then like Davis Schneider because he's a little bit older?
I mean, that's probably the reasonable one. It's not the most exciting one. I feel like having Barger and Loperfido in the picture would be more fun than just tossing Davis Schneider back out there, especially given his second half of the season.
Yeah, he's another guy, but like huge spring training, I think. Again, like a guy who doesn't have anything to prove in AAA. And I think you look at it, there's so many of these Blue Jays guys, like none of them have anything to prove in AAA at this point. And the Bisons are gonna be, man, they're gonna be good to start the year based on the guys that they've got coming back there. But I think you know what you look at them all though, and like these are all the guys who have touched the majors, right? And like dream scenario is like Aurelvis Martinez has an insane spring. He's your opening day third baseman. Alan Roden cracks the opening day lineup as your left fielder. Anthony Santander is your DH. Like I don't think that's going to happen because this organization is too
Conservative on that.
conservative and patient with their prospects and everything like that. But they would be a fun story, I think, to like have a them emerge as maybe a guy who's like pushing for a roster spot. And again, like there are guys who you need to be getting at bats, so they either need to be in the opening day starting lineup or in AAA.
Yeah, so you've kind of got to figure out exactly what you want to do with these options, right? I don't know. It's better to have these guys than to not. Is kind of the
Yeah.
the way that you put it, and I agree. And it's almost a silly thing to say, but it wasn't the case last year.
Let's move on to the pitchers because you know what I think we can go in circles on the lineup where you want the young guys in there, but you don't want them on the bench kind of thing. And I think you're probably going to be looking at a bench that is like guys with lower ceilings, right? Or with with the major league experience. Like Fangraphs right now, they have the Blue Jays bench listed as Heineman, Jimenez, David Schneider, and Miles Straw. And if that was the reality, I wouldn't really be that shocked.
Yeah, it seems like a reasonable scenario. But let's talk pitching. I mean,
Yeah.
the starting rotation I think is pretty set in terms of 1 through 5. You're going Gosman, Barrios, Bassett, Scherzer, probably Bowden Francis with an outside shot that you're looking at Yariel Rodriguez, right? Is there anything else that would be in the picture there? Like Eric Lauer is a depth option. Adam Kloffenstein's a depth option. Jake Bloss is a depth option. Is there anyone else that I'm forgetting about?
No, I think unless somebody gets hurt, like that's your five. I don't even think Yariel has much of a chance without an injury of kind of cracking that rotation, and I don't think that they're going to go to a six man. I think that Bowden was just so good in the second half, right? Like I think that there's got to be the world has to fall apart for him not to be in the rotation. So I think yeah, Gosman, Barrios, Bassett, Scherzer, Francis, and you push Yariel to the bullpen, and your bullpen is Yariel, Hoffman, Chad Green, Jimmy Garcia, Eric Swanson, Nick Sandlin, Brendan Little, and then you're looking at that last spot of being Tommy Nance, Zach Pop, Ryan Burr, one of those guys.
Yeah, it's basically if you're a big stuff plus guy, it's Tommy Nance. If you're a big Canadian content guy, it's Zach Pop. And if you're a big strikeouts guy, it's Ryan Burr. So take your pick your poison.
What do you have to be to want Josh Walker in that spot?
Delusional.
I mean, so Nance and Pop are out of options,
Yeah.
which will surely play into that decision. Um, Josh Walker, they signed to a major league deal, yeah, I don't think is that relevant. Um, as far as like adding a lefty goes, obviously that there's little, but I think Sandlin and Swanson are pretty good options against lefties based on their splitters. And then, Hoffman and Garcia have been pretty good on both sides of the platoon. So not really all that concerned about like needing to get a lefty in that spot, and Yariel kind of serves your long relief options. So really, I mean, take your pick of any of the relievers on the 40 man. Also in that mix are Easton Lucas and Nick Robertson. So, there'll be names to consider, although I think it's pretty likely where we sit right now that it's going to be Tommy Nance or Zach Pop just based on them being out of options.
Yeah. Like I said, stuff plus Nance, Canadian content. And of course, if you're a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan, you're picking Nick Robertson, right?
Yes, everybody. Nick Robertson, not enough love. He was sneaky. Like I like that guy when he was with the Cardinals because he's big and he also, throws kind of okay.
That's what you want from a seventh,
That
eighth
is
guy in the
my
bullpen,
Nick
right?
Robertson sell right there. Um, yeah, they had to DFA Michael Peterson for to add Scherzer, and Peterson it was like the big dude from the UK, and he had the great stuff plus numbers. So, but yeah, like I mean, I think if I had to pick today, I'd pick Ryan Burr to be in that spot based on what he did in his major league sample last year. But again, it's a reliever, so it's really tough to
Yeah.
say
Who
who
knows
who
year
you
over
want.
year?
Like this reliever spot, there'll be 10 guys that fill that this year.
Yeah. I think Pop is my guy. I think that the Jays clearly like him. They tendered him a contract after he put together a 6.5 ERA. Was it in the sevens? It was not a good year. He did not strike a single man out. It was slop all the way, which is unfathomable given the fact that he throws a 95-mile-an-hour sinker. But it seems like Pop is the presumptive guy to get that spot with the lack of options. And beyond that, because pitchers break, the Jays have a decent, albeit not ideal, but a decent group of guys that can slot into that spot for next year if they begin to run into injury problems again, which, as we saw last year, is not unfathomable.
Yeah, I think that's the thing too. Like the bullpen, you feel pretty good about it going into opening day. Like, hey, I probably felt better about the bullpen last year going into opening day, right? And last year they just showed us exactly why you can never have too much pitching depth or have too many different options. And that's one thing that I do hope, like if things do go poorly in the bullpen this year, that they're a little bit more reactive in trying to fix it, instead of trying to let it fix itself like
Yeah.
they did at the beginning of last year. And then obviously things just kind of snowballed on them into the year. And of course, their bullpen's like the worst in the majors. So I'm glad that they have the options, and we'll kind of see how things play out because they, you don't want to say that like Nick Robertson and Easton Lucas could end up playing big roles in this bullpen, but it's not totally out of the picture.
No. So what do you see as far as if we are rhyming off our bullpen? We rhymed off the seven. Are you picking an eighth?
Yeah, I think Burr would be my guy. Um, but if we're picking between the guys who don't have options, like I'm probably taking Nance over Zach Bob, but just based on what he showed last year, and again, like what would have to happen in spring training for any of these guys to push themselves ahead?
They'd have to come in with a brand new 90-mile-an-hour slider.
Yeah, they're again not out of the picture.
No.
Could happen. But I again, yeah, I think this kind of shows how set they are across the roster, right? Like we're kind of talking about three spots on the roster that are up for grabs in spring training, if
Yeah.
barring injury.
It's tight. It's tight. They've got their squad kind of ready to go. And
Yeah,
is this team an 88 win team? Remains to be seen. Is it an 83 win team? Remains to be seen. But there's a lot more reason to believe that they will be better than they were last year,
yeah,
based on maybe a little bit of luck with health, based on maybe a little bit of luck with production, based on some new additions. There's enough reason to me to believe that there is upside and there is, you know, a good team hiding in the reeds of this squad.
yeah. I remember when we recorded this last year, the entire premise of this episode was, who's going to bounce back, right? And obviously, you highlight Springer and Vlad and Kirk and Varsho, and I think arguably you look at it, and Vlad was the only guy that like had what you would consider a bounce back campaign, and this year it's kind of the same group, right? Like it's Springer, it's Kirk, it's Varsho that you're probably less confident in his 2023 being, or I guess it would be his 2022 being his offensive, what you can get from him offensively. And then Bo Bichette is in that group now, and I guess Andres Gimenez as well, right? So those are the kind of the bounce backs that you're looking for, and just the presence of Santander, I think does kind of ease things a little bit offensively, where you feel pretty confident in what he's going to give you, and then you need these guys to bounce back. But if you had to pick from like that group, like who are you most confident in being significant contributor offensively?
It's
It's
a tough
just Bo
question.
Bichette. It's just Bo Bichette. It's just Bo Bichette. I
Well, like,
think.
listen, like, I don't even know if I include Bo Bichette in that category because it's such an anomaly year. Although, again, I guess we're going running it back with the year two of the Chris Bryantification of Bo Bichette. We'll see if that is the case. But I'm picking Andres Gimenez if I can't pick Bo to be the guy to contribute offensively.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think Kirk is an interesting name in that spot, just on the second half that he had. Again, that 2022 season feels further and further away every single day that passes, every single at bat he takes, the 129 WRC plus All-Star, but what he brings you defensively obviously is really important, and we'll kind of see. Hopefully he hits more than 5 home runs this year.
That would be a pretty significant improvement.
Okay, before we get out of here, we can talk about the NRIs. I think, like we said, the roster is pretty set, so these guys are in tough. If you're, more the veteran side of things. Obviously, you look at like what happened last year with us sitting there talking about Daniel Vogelbach and Eduardo Escobar and Joey Votto. Like there aren't really any of those types yet. Again, they could add any of these types of veteran guys to compete for a spot, or we mentioned like a DH type, a lefty off the bench, like that would be, I think, a spot where they could pursue like some minor league contracts, I think. But of the NRIs, I don't want to list them all. But we have the list here. Like who do you think of this group is the most intriguing for the 2025 Blue Jays?
Like the obvious pick is Alan Roden because he's so close to the bigs. But if we're gonna pick a non-prospecty type, hot guy, the projections really like Michael Stefanik or Stefanik.
I think it's Stefanik.
Needless to say, he's the guy that the projections like. So I'll be keeping an eye on him. The other guy, and I've kind of planted my flag on him a couple times, RJ Schreck, I think, is a guy to keep an eye on. And lastly, Eric Pardinho left the organization, makes his way back, was a contributor last year in the high minors as a reliever. Uh, I think he could play a role on this team in the bullpen this year. So I think that that's a guy as well I'm going to be keeping an eye on, not necessarily during spring training, but as the year progresses.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you kind of look like the only veteran types that they kind of brought in to be on this list are like Eric Lauer, Christian Bethancourt, Stefanik, like you mentioned, and like Richard Lovelady. Kevin Gowdy's kind of in that group as well. But the rest of these NRIs are basically prospect D type players. So yeah, I think Stefanik's a good name to highlight. He'll be interesting. Roden obviously is the guy that everybody's going to be watching. I think I'm going to say Mason Fluharty, obviously. And yeah, Pardino's a good one. I think the catcher stuff is going to be interesting. Like Phil Clark, intriguing as far as does he have the goods to be a big league catcher? Obviously the bat was kind of the selling point on him, and I've heard like that the defense has come a long way. So if he can kind of prove his worth defensively, I think there's probably some value there that could be like not a MLB starting catcher, but potentially a backup. And I don't think that he's beating out Heineman or Bethancourt at this point, but I think a good spring training would go a long way towards him potentially being, like a backup catcher of the future and a guy that could maybe end up on the MLB roster this year.
I mean, I count 7 catchers here. And maybe part of that is, pitchers and catchers report early, and you need a million catchers to catch all of your million pitchers that show up to spring training. But based on the jump ball that seems to be the backup catcher position, we were joking beforehand. Maybe it's kind of like a carnival carny being like, who can be my backup catcher? Come be the Blue Jays backup catcher. So I don't know. Maybe it's one, maybe it's the other, but needless to say, there's a there's a good number of them.
Yeah, it'll be I don't want to say a fun battle to watch because it's a backup catcher spot, but it is they are a Alejandro Kirk injury away from being in some trouble at the catching position.
Yeah, that's going to be something that the health of Alejandro Kirk will be something that is going to be very much important to the success of this Blue Jays team.
Very, very much so. And I said this before too, but like, having Alejandro Kirk and Danny Jansen brain where, these guys have just been the duo behind the plate for the past, I guess like 3-4 years at this point, and now they've got to deal with having like a defense no bat backup catcher is going to be a change. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
it's a change in pace from the last couple of years. That's that much is
Yes.
for sure.
All right. Well, do you have any other thoughts ahead of spring training? Any other guys that you're watching for? Any battles that you are intrigued by?
Bullpen could change. Bullpen changes very fast in the world of relief pitching. Right now there's one spot up for grabs. You're a tweaked elbow, a tweaked shoulder away from a couple of very interesting developments on the pitching side.
Hopefully, that's not the case.
Hopefully.
All right, but that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View Podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us there at the Bird's Eye View Pod. If you're listening along on the podcast provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Worden_Zach. Jori is at J Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEB_pod. Thank you so much for listening.